This is episode 69 of the Triage Method podcast with me, Gary McGowan, and Paddy Farrell.
Is there a reason you're talking like that?
How are you doing, Paddy?
Positively fantastic. I am quite enjoying the weather over here because I'm still in Boise, but I'm also having a bit of a laugh every time I go on Instagram and everything. Everyone at home in Ireland is like, oh, the heat, or any of the people that I follow in England, they're like, the heat. And it's like, I go online and look at it, it's like 25 degrees. I'm like, okay. You see in England, it's like 35 degrees. I've been over here for the whole summer and it's been 30 to 39 degrees on average every single day. And I've just been like, what the fuck are people complaining about? Man, it pisses rain in Ireland for maybe 6.9 days out of 7. You know?
It has rained. It's rained every day in Kerry since I came home. This whole heat thing, that's just Dublin. Only Dublin gets the heat. It's raining in Kerry.
Dublin master race. Just saying. Although I'm not enjoying all the people complaining about it. It's disgusting.
I know, it's weakness.
It literally is weakness. Imagine literally the sun. You're scared of the sun. First of all, you go, oh, I need to like put a load of sun cream on the sun. Like, okay, that's fair enough. I can agree with that. Then you go, the heat is too much for me. And come on. Sweet.
Come on.
Anyway,
that's
guys,
our.
What are we
Go
going
on. We're going to talk about the case for being a generalist. And what that means is that you are someone, or you may not be someone now, or that you would like to be someone who has a number of different, relatively well-developed fitness characteristics, but you're not trying to really hone in on just one of them. Okay, so you're not trying to be the specialist. An example of a specialist would be someone like a powerlifter. They have very, very specific goals. There's like their exercises are defined, the parameters of those exercises are defined, even the amount of reps that you do is defined in terms of the sport. So like that's a real specialist sport. Same with weightlifting, and even to a degree, I would say like bodybuilding is still a specialist sport because it's a very specific need. Like ultimately the goal is to, like, you need nothing else but you need to develop your muscles to get them bigger, and you need to get leaner. Like that, like for most people, you could summarize it as that. So they're like quite specialist sports.
With the bodybuilding one, it's on that edge of being and being specialist, because the goal is specified. You know, like it's a very specific goal that you're trying to achieve, but the path to that goal is not necessarily specified. Like obviously we have, you know, best case ideas of how to go about achieving this, but obviously that has to be very individualized, which then starts becoming into this kind of, it's a generalist kind of approach, because you have to be big all over, well proportioned, all that kind of stuff. But at the end, like what you're saying, it is kind of specialized. It's like you just have one thing that you need to do, you know? But anyway, go on.
Yeah, so and obviously it's the same for, you know, if you're a sprinter, you have specific things that you train for. You have specific fitness characteristics that you need to develop. Same for an endurance runner, same for all these different athletes. And the reason that we feel that this is an important topic to touch on is not just because it's sort of our personal philosophies as it relates to training, but more so because from my perspective, like standing back and observing the way people go about designing their training, it's often based on like following specialists on social media. So like they're designing their training programs based on people who are specialized with very specific goals, like bodybuilders or powerlifters, say, and they're designing their programs as someone who has general goals, but in line with what that person is doing. And I think that's kind of, that can be a problem for some people. For some people, it's just fine because you can just still go ahead and try and train like them and do your bit of running and do your bit of martial arts or whatever you do, and you're fine. But for some people, I think it leads them astray a little bit, especially like GAA players who end up training like specialist powerlifters or something, but they're not then putting in the time and the pitch for their skills and developing their aerobic base and et cetera, et cetera. So that sort of forms the basis of why this is an important discussion.
Yeah, it is a it's a really hard conversation to have, and I don't actually think like it's going to be easy to fully elucidate what we're trying to say. And I think also a lot of people are going to kind of miss the point. It's going to kind of go over their head because it's a topic that you kind of have to be ready to accept. If that makes sense, right? Like you said, it probably applies most to the general public, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as someone just a general population person who likes to train, or maybe who doesn't really like to train and is just kind of wanting to go to the gym to maybe lose a few pounds or whatever, right? You just are general population. You're not an athlete. You're not, I don't know, you don't have a defined actual endpoint goal in terms of training. You know, maybe you do want to lean out a little bit or build a little bit of muscle, but the actual training itself is not as defined, right? So it probably applies most to those people, but it does also, like you said, apply to athletes as well, because they kind of fall down the same trap that the general population falls down. And that is, you basically have all of the goals, but none of the goals, right? Like you follow fucking, we'll say 20 different modalities or 20 different people that are doing 20 different modalities on Instagram. You know, you're following someone who is a marathon runner or maybe an ultra endurance runner, you know, someone like, I don't know, fucking David Goggins or Cameron Haynes or something, you know. Maybe you also follow some hunters or stuff, you know, again, like Cameron Haynes, he does his hunting, you know, so you're kind of like, oh, okay, like there's some, I like those kind of things. Maybe you also follow some, you know, Insta Huns who are like all about building their booty, you know, and then maybe you follow some, I don't know, football players, maybe you follow some movie stars, you know, and maybe you follow some martial art athletes, you know, maybe Conor McGregor or something. So you're kind of like in the MMA world as well, you know, and you follow these kind of bodybuilders who are like jacked and tan, you know, and you follow these power lifters and you see these huge squat numbers they're putting up. And maybe you follow some Olympic lifters. You see even these juicy squats, you know, proper upright, high bar, oh, beautiful, and putting up huge numbers, you know. So you have this huge variety of different things, these different modalities you're being exposed to. And this is, again, your general population and your athletes as well, you know? And it can be very hard to then dissociate yourself from that, you know? Like, because you have no actual goals, but also having all of the goals because you're following all these people, you're like, oh, I'd love to do that. Oh, I'd love to do that. Oh, I'd love to do that. You essentially get this kind of paradox of choice, you know? And that can first of all lead to this kind of paralysis by analysis where you're like, oh, well, I don't really know what exercises I should do because I see these people doing these exercises and I see these people doing these exercises and I kind of want both of those adaptations. So let's see how I can fucking juggle around things in my program and kind of fit this stuff in. You know, maybe you're like, oh, I wouldn't mind doing a bit of cardio as well. You know, and it's like that. You end up with this kind of bastardized program that is not actually bringing you closer to your goals, and it's just fitting a load of different things into your program, right? And this is why I think it's going to be hard for people to truly grasp what we're saying, because what I'm saying there now is you don't want to just be fitting a load of different things into your program, right? But what we're also going to suggest is having a generalist approach, right? So those two things can kind of be conflated in your head. You know, it's like, oh, well, if I want a generalist approach, that means I want to get exposure to the widest variety of modalities and training methods. I don't want to specialize in any specific exercises, or I don't want to do any specific, you know, cardiovascular work or stretching work. It's just all generalist. I want to be able to do whatever the fuck, whenever the fuck. And again, this is kind of what CrossFit tries to achieve. You know, they're like, oh, they aren't the best at anything, but they are good at everything. You know, that's kind of their whole, you know, ethos. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. We're not going to be competing in the Olympics in Olympic lifting, but we can Olympic lift. You know, we're not going to be competing in the Olympics in gymnastics, but we can do gymnastics. You know, and they're kind of like, we're trying to hit the even point where we're getting all these different modalities and we're getting decent at all of them, right? But again, like what we're saying is that's not necessarily the path to go down, but we do agree with being a generalist, you know? So it's kind of hard to delineate those two. And I actually think for all the shit that it gets, CrossFit actually does do this well, and it also does the community aspect well, which is something that, you know, a lot of gyms, a lot of different chains or whatever do miss, you know? But yeah, so Gary, how do we kind of go about developing a thought process around this? So if you are someone that's listening, you're kind of like, okay, I am trying to develop an all-round physique. I want to improve my body composition. I want to improve my strength. I want to improve my fitness, and we'll say flexibility, mobility as well. But you don't actually have any specific goals. How do you not fall down the trap of just trying to do everything? And how do you actually go about achieving your goals? Would it be a case of a needs analysis? Would it be a case of specializing to then generalize? Like what's the overall guiding light? Like how do we go about this?
Yeah, so for me, there are two different ways that you can go about this. One is to like adopt a periodized approach in which you focus more on different things at different points in time. An example of that would be, for example, in the winter time, let's say from October to February, you spend time gaining a little bit of weight, and your focus is more so on like hypertrophy training. Like that's mainly the basis of your training. You might be doing a bit of strength work then, but during that period of time, like that's your primary goal. So that takes up, let's say, 70% of your training time. And then let's say your other two activities, just to keep it like relatable for us. Let's say your other two activities were you like to do running in the distance of 5 to 10 kilometers, and you like to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, let's say. Okay, so you're doing a little bit of grappling, you're doing a little bit of running, and you're doing strength training. So let's say you went during that winter period, you spent about 60 to 70% of your time of that strength and hypertrophy work. You took maybe 20 or so percent of your training time and allocated it to jiu-jitsu, so you're backing off a little bit, and then your running is taking up the extra 10% of your training time. Okay, it doesn't have to look like that, it's just an example. And then it could then be the case that as you transition into the summer period, you, let's say, want to lose a bit of body fat, you want to focus more on your jiu-jitsu, you've booked a 10-kilometer race for May, so you start to shift your focus more onto those things. And that's just like one example, and you could do that like on a month-to-month basis, it could be on a quarterly basis, or it could be kind of on that like half-year basis. You just split the year in half and focus on different things. So it does depend on what you're kind of interested in. Personally, I prefer the approach that is a little bit harder to put into practice, and that actually is kind of just doing a few things at once and keeping that relatively consistent over time. But to do that, I think you have to also to add the context. My my back my background, like getting into training, was mainly like just lifting weights. Like that was what I did for a few years straight before I kind of considered anything else. So for me, I kind of laid that foundation to the point where I'm like relatively happy with what I've gotten from weight training so far, believe it or not. And I'm kind of at that point where I'm like, when I wake up in the morning, I don't get excited about the prospect of like, oh, I want to really gain more muscle or add 20 kilos to my 1 max. Like it's just not exciting to me. So for me, I'm able to kind of put that in the back burner and just be like, if I can get 3 days of resistance training, maybe 4 days, like I'm delighted with that. I'm very happy with that because I know it's enough for me to at least maintain and potentially make slow progress over time. But I know I'm not really pushing the most that I could get out of my strength and muscle building. So I'm accepting that because of my past essentially. And then along with that, I'm able to, do a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, train that a few days per week, and also get out for runs kind of when I'm interested. For me, I think it's easiest to have just like two things that you're kind of you're pushing forward if you're trying to push them forward, and one thing that's a little bit on the back burner. So for me, that is kind of running. I don't get too stressed. I try to get maybe go out for a run like twice per week if I can, but if I only get once per week, some weeks I'm happy enough with that because I know that I've hit my main targets for the week, and that's getting in like my resistance training and the bit of conditioning training that I do while I'm in the gym, and also the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think they're the two like main approaches that you can apply here. But I think it's important also to recognize that this isn't just a case of like, it's not just a case of like, what do you want now? It's also a case of like looking at things bigger picture and considering, what might I want in 10 years? And also like, what is most likely to be good for my health? Because I think this is something that people often brush aside when they think about their training, is that, oh, I'm a powerlifter, I do strength training, so my health is covered. Like, not recognizing that, like, just because you lift weights doesn't mean that you get away with like having poor conditioning. That is independently associated with better health. So you do have to still keep that into consideration. And also, you're going to live past your 30s and you're going to live past your 40s. So you have to ask yourself, like, what might I want to do in the future? So while some people might love to specialize when they're young and just be like, I'm going to go all in on powerlifting, that's fine. But if you're only doing physique training, and you're afraid to do cardio because it's going to, hurt your gains, but all your friends at work go for like 5 and 10K runs regularly, and you're not engaging in those because of like fear, like, which I've known people who have genuinely like not engaged in things like that because they're like, but won't that like mess up my recovery from training? I think that can impede you, like, socially to some degree, but also in terms of like your long-term engagement with like health and fitness. Like, you might want to go for hikes, you might want to go for runs sometimes, you might want to be able to swim, you might want to have this wide kind of capacity that you can use to live a better life to some degree. So yeah, there's definitely multiple reasons why you might want to engage in such an approach.
Yeah, and as I said, like, it's going to go over a lot of people's heads because first of all, it's a hard concept to fully grasp because most people in the fitness industry do specialize, right? Like they have that trade-off, and we're also not fully advocating the full generalist approach, right? Where you basically just do everything, right? And there's people out there that do this really, really well. For example, like you have like Ido Portal, right? Like his whole concept is to have that generalist movement capacity, where you're fit enough to do whatever the fuck you want, but you also have strength and we'll call it stability in whatever fucking ranges you could ever possibly get exposed to, right? But even though that's a brilliant thought process, first of all, you have to recognize that those guys train a fucking metric shit ton, right? So it's easier for them to do that when you're like, oh, well, we want to train all these fitness qualities and we basically have unlimited time to do that, so you have to recognize that. That's the same with CrossFit as well. Like, people are like, oh, CrossFit do so well at this, and this. And it's like, yeah, but all of those CrossFit athletes are training 3-4 times a day, so it's like, of course, like, I don't know how you think you're going to emulate that with your 45 minute to an hour gym session when they're spending 6 hours per day training. It's like that you're not going to be able to train all of those qualities. So you're either going to get a very shit stimulus because you're training so low volume in those modalities, or you're just going to end up getting no stimulus from the overall training thing because it's like, well, you just threw everything at yourself, and it's like you're just hoping something sticks. You're just hoping you get better over time. Like, it would be like going to the gym and just doing a set of a few different exercises, but not even going truly to failure with those different exercises or really pushing it. It's just like, yeah, I just did it just to tick it off the box, and I'm still fatigued from yesterday because I did the same thing yesterday. Well, different things, but the same concept. I just did a fucking shitload of things, one set of it. See you later. Next, So it's really hard to fully grasp what we're saying. But basically, what we're trying to say is there is a generalist approach you can take, which for the vast majority of people is going to be the best approach in terms of your health, your actual outcomes. And if you go back and you look at or listen to the podcast I did with Mark, we kind of touched on some things like this when we were talking about, people are trying to build muscle, right? And obviously, like, building muscle is kind of a side effect to training. Like, it's not an effect, right? So if you keep that in mind, well, yes, you can bias your training to focus on eliciting that side effect. If you're thinking long term, and if you're thinking about your health and longevity or whatever you want to call it, you would be best picking exercises that give you more capacity, right? And this, again, even when saying this, it kind of falls down into that kind of thought process where it's like, oh, these are functional exercises, you know? And again, this is what I'm saying. It's a really hard concept to fully grasp. And again, it's going to go over a lot of people's heads. I'm not saying, oh, you have to go for these functional exercises, these TRX landmine kickback rows or fucking whatever. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there's going to be exercises for you that lead to a better movement capacity, right? For example, we can take a squat pattern, right? There's going to be certain types of squat patterns that are going to be better for you if we take the long-term longevity, whatever approach, right? And me and Gary were just talking about this beforehand because obviously we do jiu-jitsu and whatever. But you could choose a back squat, right? You could choose a low bar back squat, right? And that might be the exercise that allows you to lift the most amount of weight, right? So if you in your head, you know, you're following these power lifters or whatever, and you're like, yeah, actually, I fucking love that. Lift heavy weights, you know, do triples, fucking singles, whatever. I love that. I love seeing those people train that, right? You can do that, but you have to realize that you are specializing into something, right? And that specialization may not actually be what you ultimately want, right? So again, like we're looking at that squat pattern, right? For some people, that low bar squat might be unreal at actually loading that squat pattern for them. They have the perfect mechanics for it, so they're actually getting some sort of squat pattern. However, for the vast majority of people, that kind of low bar squat is basically going to be a hip hinge, right? So it's basically going to be a shoulder loaded deadlift, right? You know, like almost like a good morning, but not, right? And that's the case for me anyway. Like it's literally like I can, even when I high bar squat, like it doesn't feel like my quads do anything. You know, it literally feels like my low back and my glutes do everything. And that's even with like a high bar squat, allowing the knees to travel forward, right? That's just because my femurs are fucking 100 million meters long. But you may be better choosing something that actually loads that squat pattern so that you can get into this kind of more upright position that is more traditional kind of squat pattern that, you know, people are like, oh, babies can squat, so everyone should squat. So for example, that could be a safety bar squat. That could be a front squat. That could be a goblet squat. That could be a Smith machine squat. That could be a hack squat. That could be any number of these different things, right? So if your thought process is, I want to actually be good at squatting, at actually loading the lower body in that kind of squat pattern so that I have that movement capacity for whatever I get into, you know, and you see this a lot where people are like, oh yeah, like I do a load of squats in the gym. And even if they do like say high bar back squats and they're like, yeah, I do that. Then you get them to sit down in a squat for 30 minutes, you know, like they're in bits because they're not actually strong and don't have that actual endurance in that squat pattern. They have it in that one squat pattern of the high bar or the low bar or whatever, right? And that doesn't mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, oh, these guys are saying don't low bar squat or don't high bar squat and pick these other variations. That's not what I'm saying. Like, again, it could be perfect for you. Those variations could be perfect for you. They could be exactly what you need. Or you could be doing other things in your training that allow you to get strong in those overall ranges, you know? So again, looking at that generalist big picture, it's like, what are your actual goals? Like, what are you actually trying to achieve with these exercises? You know, if it is a side effect of, you know, you want to build muscle and you say that that's the actual thing you want to achieve, then a lot of you need to change your programs, because you're saying you're doing a squat because you want to load the quads, but your squat looks like a good morning, you know? So it's like that, you're not achieving that goal. And then you dig a little bit deeper and it's like, oh, well, I actually want to squat because, you know, I follow, I don't know, Dan Green, and he's a power lifter and he's juicy quads, you know, and like looks great, you know, I want to be like that, you know? I was like, okay, so now we're kind of getting a little bit closer to your real motivations. And this is kind of where we'll move the conversation later on in the podcast. But to an extent, you have to specialize to generalize, right? Like you have to spend some time, like Gary was saying, doing a certain modality or doing a certain movement or doing whatever, so that you have that capacity. Like Gary was saying, he came to this from, a resistance training background. So he's already built that capacity. He's already built that movement capacity, that kind of base. And now we can go into these other things, right? And he can just keep that on the back burner. So there are going to be times where you have to specialize, and doing certain exercises or doing certain training programs or doing certain training modalities is going to be what gives you the ultimate generalist ability, right? But when you're thinking of, first of all, exercise selection, you have to be thinking of not just the side effect you're trying to elicit, like the muscle building, but also what does that build in terms of your overall capacity down the line. Like if you do a load of resistance training and you get so big that you can't wipe your ass, or you're so immobile as a result, it's like you have gone so far down that kind of specialist route that you've actually lost capacity. And that's what happens to a lot of people, right? They actually lose capacity, movement capacity, health capacity, whatever. So that's fine. Like if that's your bread and butter, like you're a bodybuilder and you make a living from being a bodybuilder, and obviously that's what you have to do. Like, and anyone who says differently is, well, mostly a liar, because people make those trade-offs all the time. People are like, oh, that's stupid. Why would they risk their health to be a bodybuilder, even though it's making them money? But then you look at that person, it's like, well, you sit for 40 hours a week at a desk. It's like this. And I'm not saying that that's like their equivalent, but it's like, you've made a trade-off as well. Like that was a trade-off you were willing to make. You were willing to make that. Oh, I have to sit for 40 hours per week. I now live a sedentary lifestyle as a result. So you've made your trade-offs, they've made their trade-offs. So we're all making trade-offs. And that, I think, is the crux of this whole conversation. It's like, you just have to be aware of what trade-offs you're making, right? And whether those trade-offs you're making right now are building towards something else down the line. Like you could be saying, okay, well, actually what I need right now is to build muscle. So you're going to make some trade-offs. You're not going to be as cardiovascularly fit as you possibly could be. You're not going to be as, maybe not doing your sport or whatever else as much. I'm focused on the muscle building side of things. That's just your focus for now. That's what you want. And you're willing to accept that you're not going to be as good in your sport, or maybe you don't do sport, but you're willing to accept that you're not going to be as cardiovascularly fit. You're willing to accept that, maybe in the pursuit of this, you're putting yourself in an ill health position. You're like, oh, well, I'm going to go on a gaining phase and I'm going to gain some body fat, and I'm going to accept that there's negative connotations around that, so you just have to be willing to accept and to be aware of the trade-offs that you are making, Anyway, Gary, I'll let you talk for a little bit because I've just been shiting on.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of this is like where you see value from training as well, because this is the main thing, is that like generally what I see with people that like message me is that if you look at who they generally follow like a very homogenous group. Like it might be like a group of bodybuilders because they look up to them, which is totally fine. But the result ends up being like what you're always exposed to is what you almost like expect everyone to be like. It's almost like this assumption that, well, if you're going to the gym, then like obviously your goal is to maximize muscle building and then to be as lean as possible. Like you just start to assume that, and that makes sense, like because you are like willingly or not, you are ingraining yourself into a specific culture, and then there are specific memes within that culture that essentially act as like thought viruses, regardless of whether or not you want them to. You start to view things differently because of the culture that you're in. So if you're in bodybuilding culture, then you think of food different to the way other people think of food. You think of climbing a mountain potentially as an activity that could compromise your results, different to how someone else might think about it in terms of, oh, that's a fitness challenge. I'd be so fit if I did that. So you do start to kind of reframe your thought process depending on the culture that you've put yourself in. And then if you are only deriving value from specific like metrics that are like based on others, like which is fine, it tends to it can potentially lead your training astray. So what I would say is that like step one to starting to appreciate like why a generalist approach might be useful would be to start following more people from diverse sporting backgrounds or athletic backgrounds or whatever. Like you were saying, Paddy, you follow some hunters. I follow quite a few runners. Both of us probably follow like a lot of guys who have come out of the military. You got these people from different backgrounds, fighters, powerlifters, bodybuilders, hikers, whatever. Follow different people from different backgrounds, and you will genuinely find, without even trying, that suddenly what you value will change, because you're suddenly seeing people who are, that what those CrossFit people do, that's like actually pretty cool. And that doesn't mean you go straight to one, and that's why I'm saying follow a multitude of people. My dad always says that anytime the Olympics, or when Wimbledon was on when he was a kid, suddenly they'd all stop playing soccer for like 2 weeks and they'd all go out and play tennis. Because that's essentially what you're being exposed to, and suddenly it's like, oh, this is so cool, because that's what you were shown, which is totally different to the rest of the year. So what I'm suggesting is that you start to vary what you're exposing yourself to, just like you want to expose yourself to diverse opinions, as you should. You don't want to get caught up in.
No, Gary, you silenced the other people. Jesus Christ.
You don't want to get caught up in like an internet like silo where you're just only exposed to the same stuff all of the time, because realistically, while most of us go to work every day, like social media for a lot of people, that's your community. Like that's what you're exposing yourself to. That's probably where you have a lot of your interactions every day. So it is important to ask yourself, how is this actually affecting my life? And I think like this is more like opinion based, but like for me and you, let's say, I think we both probably share the idea that we want to be like fit and strong and healthy so that we can be useful in as many situations as possible, and that at any point in my day, if something was presented to me, I would never have the excuse that I'm not fit enough to do that. Like, and there's loads of simple situations that pop up all of the time. Like we were late for our flight because we had a connecting flight when we were in Greece, and essentially to make the flight, I had no choice but to like run like 2 kilometers to get to the airport desk to be able to be like, oh, we're here, I promise, whatever. And like that wasn't a feat of fitness. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I did it in like 30 seconds, but it was just like, by the end I was like, oh, that was a far run, and it made me think like, God, if I actually didn't train, I wouldn't be able to make this flight, which then cost me whatever, an extra €600. So these situations, like, they crop up. Same when you're like going through an airport and everyone else is like on the travelator, or everyone else is taking the escalator, and you've got your cases. Like, you just, if you're strong and you're fit, you just pick up your case and you walk up the empty stairs and you're ahead of everyone. You get ahead of the check-in lines, and then that has like a feed forward effect in your day. So there are these things that do pop up, and I just think if you can adopt that philosophy, like, I'm not saying you have to adopt our personal philosophies, but I do think there's something to be said for trying to ask yourself, like, am I prepared to do all of the things that I could potentially have to do? Like, if something was to happen in this situation, whatever that is. It's quite vague, but as we said.
Yeah, as you were saying, like, basically you want to have a capacity to do whatever. Like, you see this again, like, and people are not aware of trade-offs, I think, a lot of the times. Like, I always use the example of what the fuck's his name, your man, the cyclist, not Neil Armstrong, what the fuck's his name,
Lance
Armstrong. Like, he didn't used to take the shopping in from the groceries in from the car, because he was like, no, it just makes my arms and my shoulders and traps too big. He made his wife do it. Like, she had to carry the shopping in. He was just like, no, that's I'm not doing that, because it just makes my arms too big, which is, again, counterproductive to his actual goal of cycling. So, and bodybuilders do this as well. People are like, oh, like this, like what's his name, Ben Pecosi has said it before, where he was like he wouldn't help move things around the house. He was like, just get a mover to do that. He's like, I'm a bodybuilder. He's like, I just care about my bodybuilding. He's not putting himself at risk of maybe slipping a disc or like pulling a muscle in his back or something because he's moving a chair around. He's like, no, I'm a bodybuilder. I don't do that. Hire a mover to do that. So people will look at the outcome but also want other capacities, and it's like, that's, you're not accepting the same trade-offs that they have accepted to get to that position, you know but
Yeah.
you want the same capacity as them, which is just not the way, it's just not the way the world works. Like, I always look at it like, remember when it snowed before? Like, obviously it has snowed before, but when it snowed loads before recently enough,
Yeah.
like, in my, like, community, in my area, like, there's a lot of old people that live in my estates. Like, they were trapped in their houses, they couldn't get out. Like, so me and my brothers just went around and shoveled driveways. Like, it gave those people the capacity to actually fucking live their lives rather than slipping on ice and dying, like, but if I wasn't strong enough, I wasn't fit enough to do that, then you're just left, you've left your community with their hand tied behind their back, because there's no one left in the community that can do this. And that's, I'm saying the community, and I mean that in whatever community you find yourself in, whether it's like the family unit, or your larger community, whatever it is. If you don't have the capacity to help people in that community because you're not fit enough, you're not strong enough, you're not able to do those movements, you're not able to do those things, it's like, well, like, you've left that community short. And there is that quote by, I think it's Aristotle, it's like, no man, what's the actual quote? No man has the right to not see his body developed, or whatever the fuck the quote is. I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Look it up there, Gary, on your phone while I keep talking. But basically, what that quote means is, yeah, okay, it's like, you don't have the right to do that. It's like, you don't have the right to not see your body reach its full capacity. But that's a responsibility as well as a right. Like, and it's not just to see the development or whatever. It's like, it is to actually have the ability to help your community. Do you get it, Gary?
Yeah, it's Socrates, of course. No man has the right to be an amateur in the matter of physical training. It's a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength for which his body is capable.
Yeah. So
Well
again, like,
done,
he says, it's
Socrates.
right, but it's like this, it's a responsibility as well as that. So you have to take that into consideration when you're looking at what you're spending time in the gym, you're spending time doing your sport, you're doing whatever, but what is it actually building towards? Like, yes, you may want to influence a certain outcome, and like, we always use the ones, the kind of three ones, where it's like health, performance, or body composition, but it's like, they are just an arrow point. They're just the tip of goals. Like, they can branch back into thousands of different sub kind of categories, but ultimately you have to just be sure that what you're doing in the gym is actually achieving what you're trying to do overall. And again, that might mean, like we're saying, that there are times when you specialize. That might mean that you just have a very generalist approach, and you've accepted not being the best at certain exercises, because a lot of people, and this is the same, like, it's kind of mad when you see people say, like, oh, I could do that if I had X, Y, and Z, or if I had the time, or whatever. And it's like, it's really strange, because nobody says that about, I don't know, playing the piano or something. But when it's exercises that everyone has the ability to do, like the squat, say, like, you just go down to the gym and do a squat. It's like, oh yeah, obviously I could do that. Like, or fighting, people do this all the time. It's like, oh, I could beat him in a fucking knock. And it's like, you don't even fucking know the capacity that he has, but because you've maybe been in a fight before, or you've seen people fighting before, it's like, yeah, of course I could do that. So people always think that they could be the best, when in reality it's like, the vast majority are actually below mediocre. So you just have to be sure that what you're trying to achieve is actually what is reflected in your training program, is actually what's reflected in your diet program, your lifestyle, whatever else. And I think the best way to go around it, because again, like, I realize what we're talking about is incredibly vague, and we keep saying a generalist approach, and there's no definition for a generalist approach, because again, like, you can go down the route and be like, oh, well, then where do you draw the line of generalist and specialist? You know, is it like you have the capacity to do all these gymnastic moves? Do you have the capacity to, you know, do all these strength moves? Do you have the capacity to do all these, we'll call them fitness moves, locomotion moves, we'll call them, like running, sprinting, swimming, fucking, I don't know, climbing monkey bars, whatever the fuck, right? Do you have the capacity to do any of those things? And it's like, where do you fully draw the line? And again, this is why this conversation is so hard to fully articulate, because it's kind of a personal thing, you know, as well as being a generalizable thing, you know. Like I always look at it, it's like you should be able to swim, full stop. You know, like I'm not saying you need to be an Olympic swimmer. I'm not saying you need to be fucking the best swimmer in the pool, but you should not drown. You know, like
Yeah, it's pretty important skill, like.
exactly, right. And that's the kind of way I look at all of these things. It's like, you don't want to be the worst person in it, in the pool, in the whatever. Like you want to be someone that other people can rely on in whatever situation, you know. And I think that's just a good philosophy to have with regard to training. It's like, yeah, you might not be the best bench presser, but you know, you're all right at it. You know, you're not. And again, that's a relative term, you know, because like you're all right and my all right, because we've already discussed that I have unrealistic expectations of. So your all right might be different than my all right, but what it should ultimately build to is your overall life should enhance because of resistance training. Your overall lifestyle, your longevity, your health, your ability to engage in your life should be enhanced from the training that you do, you know. And again, we could come out here with some absolutely ridiculous standards or ridiculous goals, be like, you should be able to fucking run 10k at least, or you should be able to swim a kilometer in X amount of time, or you should be able to fight in these styles, or you should be able to squat X number or bench X number. And it's like, I don't think that ultimately helps everyone, because again, it's just arbitrary standards, you know. What you really want, and you can see people that break these standards all the time, you know. You'll see like UFC fighters, people you'll see online, people are like, what's the average squat of an MMA fighter, because they want some standard to kind of base their training off and see that. And it's like, you'll see some MMA fighters that, you know, they'd struggle to squat the bar. They don't have the technique, they've never done it before, you know. They don't have that strength skill, you know. So it's like, are you going to compare yourself to them? Like that could be someone that's an unreal fighter. All I'll say as well is, if you look at UFC or any fighting styles, it's always the person with the skinniest calves that is the best. I'm just putting it out there. I mean, like, you look at the Bronze Bomber, and he has literally zero calves, arguably the best boxer ever. You look at John Jones, literally zero calves, and again, arguably the GOAT. You know, I'm just saying, there's a correlation there that everyone should be aware of.
I'm not buying it.
But anyway, you just have to be aware of the trade-offs. And like Gary was saying, like, the best way to do this, and it's the same with political views, it's the same with religious views, it's the same with all these things, it's expose yourself to what is actually out there, you know. Expose yourself to that. And this is especially true in the fitness industry. Gary, just like that camera, that'd be fucking great. This is especially true if you find yourself really obsessing over your physique, you know, because people will do that. They'll follow fucking, you go into their, who do they follow? And it's like every single physique competitor, every single bikini competitor, every single bodybuilder, and it's all about the body image. And like, you look at the vast majority of the way those people post, it's just a topless picture or a bikini picture or whatever. Like, they're just showing a load of skin. They're just showing their physique off, you know. And I'm not saying that that's all they have to offer, but the way like Instagram algorithms, you know, or Facebook algorithms work as well, Google algorithms, they reward that kind of stuff, you know. So they're just posting, they're just gaming the system. They're just going like, okay, well, this stuff that I post gets a fuck ton of likes, and that builds my business, that builds my brand, that makes me more money. I'm going to post more of that, right? Like, they're not caring about your feelings or your feelings of inadequacy. You know, you don't have the same level of body fat that they have. You know, they maybe they do care about that, but at the end of the day, their bank balance, you know, they care about that more, you know. So they're posting that, and if you're just only following all those people, they're all about the physique, all about that. And you're not following other people that have, performance goals, that have, business goals, they're entrepreneurs, they're whatever the fuck, if you're not following all those things, it's like, okay, you're only exposing yourself to one aspect. No wonder you obsess over that aspect. Like if that's all you think about, if that you go to social media to escape your thoughts, because that's what most people do. They're afraid of being alone in their own thoughts. So they're like, oh, I'm going to actually go on social media to distract myself. And then all you do is look at these beautiful bodies. That's all you're going to think about, like that's where your mind's going to wander to, so like I was saying, like follow a diverse range of people, a range of views, ethics, morals, fucking whatever. Get exposed to that. Maybe you go, well, that's just not for me. Like I get nothing out of that. I don't see any benefit to that, or I actually think they're wrong, or you don't like them. That's fine, but you should be exposed to those thought processes, and you should audit what you are exposed to. Like if you are following people that you just look at their images and it just makes you sad, then just don't follow them. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, like I think that's actually such a key point, because like one of the most potent ways to change your behavior, or in this case maybe your thought process, is to modify your environment. And like that's not always possible. Like in the real world, it's pretty difficult to meaningfully change your environment. But online, like it's literally clicks of a button. Like if you were an alcoholic, say, or you were advising a friend who was an alcoholic, you certainly would not bring them out for a walk down the street with like hundreds of bars and be like, oh, let's actually go into each one and look around. Like you'd be like that's a terrible idea. But that is essentially on a lower level what people with body image issues, which is like a lot of people, even if it's just low level concerns, if it's consuming all of your thoughts, that's what people do when they go on Instagram every day and literally they follow 2,000 people and all of them are like physique and bikini competitors. All you're doing is exposing yourself to the exact same like images over and over again, but also like the values that come with that. Like it's reinforcing those values in your mind that I am comparing myself to this person looks great, I currently don't, whatever, and I think like that's a really potent effect of stepping back from that stuff. Like I'm not saying you have to delete your social media. I'm just saying, like, why not have 10% of your followers who are those people, but also 10% of the people who are more powerlifting based, and then you have those people who are hikers, etc., like we spoke about earlier. Because essentially what you'll start to do is then
you just follow meme accounts. You just follow meme accounts or dog pictures.
Exactly, meme accounts.
Anything else, like anything else, like if you are such a one-dimensional person that the only thing that you ever think about is stuff, like, no wonder people think that you have disordered thinking, or no wonder you have disordered thinking, because that's the only thing you think about. Like it's so telling when you look at someone's explore feed, on Instagram. It's like, oh, I can see your thoughts, because that's what the algorithm is trying to do. It's trying to see things, or trying to expose you to things that you previously have interacted with or you would like. Now, obviously, it's not 100% right, but it gives you a pretty good idea. Like if you look at someone's explore feed and all it is dog pictures, like the vast majority of my explore feed is nature and dog pictures or dog videos, especially pit bulls, because I like pit bulls. So it's
I have
like
loads of Russian memes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like you get exposed to the things that you look at more often. So it's like if you are being exposed to these things, it's within your power to change that.
Yep. So yeah, like I mean, it's like that's an important point, especially those of you who are listening who are like, oh no, I just couldn't, I'm too physique focused. Like take those steps. Like you can actually take action on doing that. Like that's something you have a lot of control over, that you can adjust. And it will like, it's not just about like not focusing so much on your body image, but it will, like if you start to diversify what you expose yourself to, it will genuinely change like what you would like to be able to do. As in, if you see all these people who are able to run like 5K runs in 15 to 20 minutes, and suddenly you're like, God, I tried a 5K run a few years ago and I couldn't even finish it. I eventually walked across the line at 45 minutes. You might actually start to think that, oh, maybe I actually amn't that fit. Why do I have fitness after my name if I can't do that? Or are you someone who climbed a 6,000 meter mountain and you're like, God, I remember the time we tried to go up Torque Mountain in Kerry. It's like 800 meters, and I nearly died. So you start to see those things, and then you're like, oh, there actually are holes that I could work on. And the beautiful thing about that is that if you are someone who has just been specializing in like, I want to improve my physique, like if you've been doing that for a few years, results are probably coming slowly. All right, like that's the reality of it. And if it's also leading to kind of toxic thought processes that are tripping over into you potentially not enjoying your life as much, if you actually take up a couple of these additional things, like let's say you just take up a little bit of running, you're going to make pretty quick progress. You're going to experience those beginner gains just like you did when you first started lifting, and then suddenly you'll start accumulating wins, and you'll start seeing that, oh, I actually can still make progress. And now you've got a couple of different things that you value yourself based on, as opposed to just how you look. You'll start to think, all right, how well is my body performing now? And you that can even help reshape your nutrition thought process. Like we spoke about this before, that like one of the things I try to do very often with clients who are quite focused on body image is get them focused on their performance in the gym, even, looking at their 5 rep max, looking at their 8 rep max, getting them to focus on strength as opposed to just body composition outcomes. So if you can have those kind of outcome based goals or those little milestones for yourself, then you'll begin to think a little bit differently about like how exactly you're fueling that. Nutrition becomes far less about deprivation when you're thinking about, oh, I need to maximize my performance. And I see that as one of the key distinctions, and it's actually more clear than you would think, between the people that we coach for GA, because we have a good few GA clients, just as an example, and the people who are solely like body composition and fat loss focused. Like there's a very clear distinction in that the athletes, they understand that my nutrition is for performance first, and that's a really key point to grasp. So yeah, there's multiple different reasons why you might want to consider this generalist thought process, and although it might seem vague, it's kind of the point. Like it's deliberately vague because it's almost like everyone just has this like assumed very specific goal that we all want. Like we all want to build muscle and lose fat, and that's all that matters, no matter how we get there. And I think we need to take a step back, especially as personal trainers, because that's one of the things that has kind of happened, is that personal training has almost become synonymous with, oh, we're just fat loss coaches, and I think that can be annoying. You talk is the point.
I can't talk over
It's
that.
Laura's house, so Laura.
I think I can shout that loud. How the fuck do you think I was?
It stopped.
But anyway, yeah, like I think that should help people kind of get into the frame of mind. But I want to actually give them a little bit of a process. And we've talked about it before, and it's that kind of identify, isolate, integrate, and then improvise. Like if you use that kind of thought process and start having a deeper think about what you're actually trying to achieve. And that's the first bit. That's that first, like, identify, like think about what is available out there, right? And we'll just think of it in terms of your body here. So there's strength qualities. There's, we'll say, muscular qualities, which are kind of just a side effect of strength qualities. There's fitness, like cardiovascular fitness, and there is flexibility, mobility, right? So there's really only 3 things you need to concern yourself with, right? That's it. Now that's just on the training side of things. Now obviously the side effects of those, could be improved health, could be improved body composition, whatever, right? But those are the 3 things your training can achieve, right? And again, they can give you those side effects as well, right? So the easiest way to start thinking of these things is, okay, look at your training. You go, okay, what am I actually trying to achieve? What do I say I'm trying to achieve? And if someone gave me the program that I'm doing, would they say those 2 things align, right? And also have a little deeper think about, what are you actually trying to achieve? Because yes, maybe body composition is your goal right now. You're trying to build some muscle, lose some fat, whatever. But where do you ultimately want that to get you to? Are you just losing body fat for the sake of losing body fat? Or are you losing body fat to improve your health? Because if it's just for the sake of it, or maybe it's for an actual performance, you want to be a bodybuilder or something, but all of those things have different approaches, even though you would think they kind of go for the same thing. Like if you're just losing body fat for the sake of losing body fat, Like you can justify doing ridiculously low calorie diets. You could justify doing ridiculous amounts of cardiovascular work, whatever, right? Overtrain. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as you achieve your outcome of losing body fat, because that's what you say your goal is. But if you're losing body fat to improve your health, to feel better, to feel good, to have energy throughout the day, that's going to be a different approach than if you're just doing it to lose body fat. You don't care. The means or the ends justify the means. Like there are two different approaches. If you're focused more on your health and you're focused more on feeling good, there's a certain approach that you go to achieve that, right? And same again, like if you're focused on winning a bodybuilding competition or a physique competition or whatever, maybe you are sacrificing your health to do that. Maybe you are getting to ridiculously low levels of body fat. Maybe you are putting yourself under conditions that are not conducive to long-term health, exposing yourself to thought processes that aren't conducive to long-term mental health. As long as you're willing to accept those things and you actually understand what you're trying to achieve, you've spent that time, you've sat down, you've gone, what am I actually trying to do? And are the processes I'm bringing about to achieve that, do they actually align with what I say I'm trying to achieve? Because oftentimes they don't. Like we were saying it before, people are like, oh, I want to strengthen my quads, and they're doing a low bar squat and their quads get no stimulation. It's like, okay, there's some sort of disconnect here. Same again, it's like if people have that thought process, like there might be better exercises to do, but okay, now we can get a better understanding because you actually enjoy those exercises, and that's why they're in the program. They actually help increase your the sustainability of the program because you enjoy those exercises, and thus you go to the gym. You like hitting numbers in them. Maybe they're not the best exercises, they're not the best modalities or whatever for your ultimate goal, but they help keep you consistent. They help keep you on point with the overall training. But once you're aware of that, you can go, okay, so that's my starting point. These are all the things I want to achieve. And again, going back to that, there's those three things. Look at your program. Where are you improving strength? Like what are you trying to do? And again, when I say strength, I don't mean that 1 to 3 rep strength, which is what everyone assumes strength means. Like strength is rep independent. Strength doesn't care if you're talking 50 reps or 5 reps. It's still the strength to do 50 reps. It's like, yes, it's a different strength quality, but it is still strength. So you look at that and you go, what am I actually trying to achieve? What strength aspects am I working on? Like that's the first thing. Where am I putting my performance towards strength? Look at that. And you go, okay, well, actually, I'm not focusing on getting stronger in anything. I've only been ever focusing on the pump that I get from the gym, how good of a connection I get with the muscle when doing this exercise. Okay, so maybe we change the thought process a little bit and we become less physique, orientated. Again, depending on the overall, what your goals are, right? So you look at that, you do that, you go, where are my strength qualities? There, these are how I'm achieving it. Perfect. These are the movement patterns. These are the ranges, whatever that I want to get stronger in. Awesome. Where's the fitness, the cardiovascular fitness stuff? Oh, you've none? Okay. Can we at least just bring in maybe a step goal per day? That's our baseline fitness, right? You do that. Awesome. Great. Then you go, okay, well, there's all these other fitness qualities. What's your resting heart rate at? Oh, it's at 70. Okay, let's see if we can bring in some more aerobic stuff to actually try and improve that, maybe you're like, oh, well, I actually wouldn't mind improving, my anaerobic performance. Let's see about the training modalities we can bring in to do that. Maybe it's your alactic performance. Again, maybe you have a sport and you're like, I wouldn't mind improving my fitness for that. And again, you look at, do a needs analysis of the sport, what fitness qualities are apparent in that sport. And then again, you do the correct modality to achieve that, and we kind of touched on the different modalities beforehand. And then again, you go, okay, flexibility, mobility, are you doing any work to improve that? And again, maybe that is achieved through your resistance training, but maybe for you as an individual, it's not. You need to do some specific work. Maybe you are doing a lot of, you're really looking, oh, I have a shit chest. I want to build my chest strength and I want to build my chest, size. And maybe you notice that your pecs do get tight after that, so maybe you need to do a little bit of stretching for your pecs, for example, right? Again, maybe you could achieve that by doing some, I don't know, dumbbell flies or something in the gym, but maybe it doesn't do it for you and you need to do some specific work, Awesome. Those are basically the qualities you can train. So look at your program and see how you're hitting those qualities. And then you can start going, okay, so I actually realized there's this huge or two huge holes in my game, and all I've been doing is resistance training. And I actually haven't been focusing on getting stronger. So I actually have nothing to show from the resistance training. Like, I think I gained a kilo in the last 5 years, a kilo of muscle. But I've been training religiously for 5 years, 5 times per week. And that's all I have to show for it. Like, I'm not actually stronger or more athletic or more mobile or whatever. So it's like, you need to start thinking of these things. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, and I suppose the only thing to add on to that then is like you've got your basic components of fitness. You know, you discussed like you split them into three. Like you've got your strength, which obviously comes with muscle building to some degree, like that you just threw them there in there as one. You've got your kind of cardiovascular stuff, whether it's aerobic specific or it's anaerobic, or like generally when you're talking about a sporting context, like you can't really put it as either really. But and then you've got like your flexibility, mobility, which is probably relevant to less people, but it's there. Essentially, like you're talking about, like joint range of motion, you know. So like resistance training does tend to take care of most of that for most people. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with having the goal of like, I just want to do the splits because it's cool. And you know, it's like, if that's your goal, I'm like, I'm not going to tell you it's a stupid goal, you know, unless you currently have like, I don't know, 30 degrees of abduction and you already are in agony. I'm like, I don't know about that, but we'll see. So you can improve those things for sure. So if that's a goal, that's a goal. But that brings it on to the second part is that like splits, that's essentially a skill, you could call it, and there's many skills that you could also want to achieve. So you can further subdivide all of that into asking yourself, like, what skills would you like to have? Like, for example, some people have never been able to do pull-ups and they would just love to be able to do 5 or 6 pull-ups if they were to get up in a bar. Like, that's a very reasonable goal to have. And again, and that's why this generalist thought process is useful, because you start to think about, all right, what are the skills that I'd actually like to have? You know, for example, one of the big things for me is that, like, when I go away, traveling or on holidays or whatever, like I'm going to Belarus in a couple of weeks, they have a playground there. I always want to be able to get a good workout in and at that playground. Okay, so that involves like lots of chin-ups, lots of push-ups, lots of dips, stuff like that. You know, if I wasn't able to do one of any of those things, like, it'd be pretty difficult to get a decent workout in. Although you could make modifications, etc. I think it's worth considering. You know, you want to have that basic capacity that if you're going to go somewhere else, you're able to train with the tools that are available. So whether it could be some of those bodyweight movements. It doesn't mean you have to go and become like the bar stars on YouTube and be able to do all crazy stuff. But like, you can do a few pull-ups, you can do a few push-ups, you can do some dips, whatever it is. You know, it might be the case that you even want to, like, oh, I was on holidays last year and I saw someone do a backflip into the pool. I'd love to be able to do a backflip. And you want to do a backflip, like that's fine. Like, we often kind of put those things outside of fitness, but like, they're reasonable goals to have. If you want to do a backflip, if you want to learn to do a handstand, if you wanted to be able to do handstand push-ups, like, you could go on and on and on and on. But ultimately, there are many, many, many skills that all kind of fall under like what we call quote unquote fitness. And I think it's important not to just be so reductionistic that we just think that fitness is just about gym machines, like treadmills and barbells. It's like, yeah, that stuff is all super stuff, but very often, like as you said, it's general physical preparedness. Like, it's all part of GPP. So like, if you have specific skills you want to develop, like, you can bring them into your program. You don't have to feel bad about that. Like, you could have your push day and at the end you do handstands, or at the end you do, I don't know, pistol squats, just because you want to, not because it's all physique focused. So yeah, you've got your components of fitness, and then you've also got your skills as well.
Yeah, and this kind of goes into the whole sporting realm as well, then, because we've obviously been dipping in and out of
Yeah.
it, maybe sports as well or whatever. Like I say it all the time, but there is no sports specific exercises in the gym. Like, it's all GPP. Like, there are obviously exercises that are going to be more beneficial given a target population, right? But at the end of the day, it is all general physical preparedness. That's all you can do in the gym, right? Unless you have a sport that is actually with those exercises. Like, obviously, if you're doing powerlifting, like they're all sport specific exercises, you know, your bench, squat, deadlift. they're sport specific exercises, right? Same as weightlifting. You know, if you're doing your snatch, clean and jerk, they're sport specific exercises. Or we'll say the derivatives of those. They're all sport specific exercises, right? But if you're, I don't know, a GA player, like you just want to have good capacity all around, good range of motion and strengthen that range of motion in all your joints, you know, because like realistically, you don't know what ranges you're going to get into in that sport, you know, like you might be like, oh, well, I don't need that strength quality, or I don't need that strength, that range of motion for my sport. But if you do something like, I know, GA as well, like you could be going in for a tackle and stuff, and then you're going to wish that you were able to have stability in your shoulder in this overhead behind the neck position, you know, and you've never trained it, you know, and all of a sudden you get tackled when you're in that position and your shoulder pops out and you're like, Jesus, I actually wish I got strong there, you know, but it wasn't sport specific, you know. It's like you just want to have a good general capacity. And this is especially true if you do a sport like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where you're basically getting fucking playing origami with someone else in a fucking gi. You know, you're getting folded into these random positions. It's like you just want to be strong in whatever positions your body can get into, you know? And that's the kind of thought process you should have if you're doing sports. It's like all these exercises that you're doing in the gym will have some carryover. Some will have better carryover to your sport. But at the end of the day, it's like it's all just general physical preparedness. Like it doesn't matter if you find split squats work really well for you, but you know, someone's saying like, oh, you have to squat for improved GA performance. Like it's irrelevant. If you notice that doing split squats improves your performance and that's your metric, that's what you're trying to do, then fucking do split squats. If you notice that you're doing an exercise and it's actually detracting from your performance, then it's a fucking no-brainer. It doesn't matter about doing that exercise because someone said it's the best exercise for X sport. If it doesn't improve your sporting performance or detracts from it, then you need to stop doing it. You know, like again, like we were saying earlier on, I think it was before the call though, like doing back squats, you know, for BJJ or even deadlifting as well can be an issue as well. You know, it beats up your lower back. And if you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know, it's very low back intensive. You're always in this kind of tucked under pelvis position. You're always in this kind of flexion of the spine. You know, if your lower back is taking a beating from doing back squats, and as a result your BJJ performance is decreased, those back squats aren't doing you any benefit for your BJJ. Now that might be fine if you're like, oh, I actually wouldn't mind doing BJJ and powerlifting. Then you're going to have to back squat. Sorry, you know, you're going to have to take the hit on one of them, you know. But if you're like, oh, I'm doing back squats to improve my BJJ, and it's leaving you unable to actually train BJJ, it's a no-brainer. Get the fuck rid of those things. You know, choose a different squat variation. I don't fucking care. Like this again, like you see people as well. People say the fuck craziest things. Like they're like, oh, do these exercises because they improve athleticism. Don't do these exercises because they're not athletic. You know, it's like this is actually it's stupid. Like I can make a strong case that the leg press is the most specific exercise you could do for BJJ and improve your athleticism, because that's literally the position you're going to be in. You're going to be on your back and you're going to be extending your legs away from you. So now I've just made the case that that's a more sport specific exercise than squats. But the vast majority of people have only been exposed to athletic training, we'll call it, in the context of field sports where they have to run, jump and do whatever, right? So they're like, oh, squats are the most, they improve your performance the most. And it's like, not for my sport. So I can improve my athleticism by doing leg press, you know, especially if you do something like a spider guard. You know, it's like, this is 100% specific here, you know. Same with flies, you know, dumbbell flies or cable flies or whatever. People are like, oh no, you don't want to isolate that. I'm like, I actually just don't want to get armbarred, you know, like that would be a very sport specific exercise. But you're now telling me that it's not sport specific. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's not sport specific to your sport, but to mine it is, you know. And there's loads of those examples, you know. So you need to have the thought process of, what am I actually trying to achieve? Like the vast majority of people just never spend that 5-10 minutes of actually just stepping back, analyzing what they want to achieve. And I mean in depth, literally going, okay, so I say I want to achieve these things. Why do are these exercises that I'm choosing the best exercises for this? No. Okay, why aren't they? Maybe it's all you have available to you. That's fine. You're making a trade-off. Once you're willing to accept that trade-off, cool, you know. But the vast majority of people just never spend that time, and as a result are doing programs or are doing training methods that don't actually adequately fix or achieve the outcomes that they're trying to influence. So the key thing you should take away from this is not even the generalist approach is best, because it's a really hard concept to fully grasp. The key thing you should be taking away from this is you need to do a needs analysis. You need to be very specific in what you're trying to achieve, and not just in the short term, because that's fine, but in the long term. Like, are you, like, a lot of young guys are like, oh, all I care about is getting swole. I just want to be fucking an absolute unit. It's like, that's cool, right? You can have that goal. That's perfectly fine. But just keep your eye to the horizon and be like, right, but I actually do want to be able to move when I'm 50, So maybe I don't need to be doing 50 sets of back squats that leave my knees feeling in bits or my low back feeling in bits, because you're doing so much volume. It's like, you just have to keep that eye to the other goals that you may have, Same again, like, people will do this, they'll jump on fucking steroids when they're like 16 or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. You don't mind that. But are you okay with explaining to your future wife that, oh, actually I can't have kids because, I wanted to gain 5 kilos of muscle when I was 18? Are you okay with that? Because it's a possibility. Now, it's not a definite, but it's a possibility. So you have to be willing to accept that if you do go down that route, So all of this stuff, you just have to be aware of what you're trying to achieve, what the bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve is, and whether you are actually setting things up in a manner that actually achieves those, or are you setting things up in a manner that it achieves it for someone else and you're just copying that because that's all you're ever exposed to.
Savage. So I suppose the overall take-home points, action points, would be, like, number one, you don't have to be afraid to venture beyond what you've been comfortable doing for the last 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years. Okay. It won't bite if you happen to go for a little bit of a run. You happen to go for a swim. You try and learn to do a few pull-ups, whatever it is. The other actionable point that was really important that we mentioned was about, essentially filtering what you expose yourself to and trying to expose yourself to more diverse individuals and activities and ideas and whatever when you are online. Like, I think that's really, really important. And then, as you said, make sure that you have some sort of needs analysis in place to design exactly what exercise approach you're going to put in place. Okay, and that doesn't have to be like I'm putting this in place for 12 weeks. It's more so like, all right, what do I want to work on over the next couple of years? What actually really matters to me? Because very often, like Paddy was saying, what tends to happen is that people just end up following the same methods that everyone else has used, assuming that they need to use them. They don't question the fact that, the squat mightn't be the best exercise for their goal, or the deadlift mightn't be the best exercise for their goal, or, if you don't like bench press, you don't have to do it. If you want to do all of your exercise on machines, like, that's fine, and you're allowed to do other things on top of that, so you can deviate from that sort of like what everyone does path. And if you have the skills to then design a program based on, like, just purely from your needs, then fantastic. But if you're able to seek inspiration from other people, other activities and stuff, you should be able to implement some things from them too. If you're thinking like, oh, I want to start some running, but where do I even start? Like, it's definitely not a good idea to keep following all the physique and bodybuilding people. Follow a few runners, see what they say, see if they have like a Couch to 5K article that they've written. You'll find lots of that stuff online, but you have to look for it and you have to consider, what do I really want? How am I going to achieve it? And then you can start to go down those paths yourself.
And also, a good idea would be to follow people that are actually doing what you think is possible. What I mean by that is, people that have the most unrealistic goals. They're like, oh, I want to do MMA, powerlifting, and triathlons. And you're like, okay, that cool, right? Are there individuals who have done this, right? Are there individuals who do this, right? because you're trying to do something that is extremely hard. So first of all, you want to know if it's possible, right? But I know there's some fucking young guns out there who are like, I'm going to be the first one to be able to do it, you know? So more power to you, right? But
Yep.
still, there's going to be individuals out there that have tried it, right? So get in touch with them, follow them, connect with them, and see, what are the pitfalls that they've identified, so you can first of all avoid them. Even if they say ultimately, oh, it's impossible to do these triathlons while powerlifting and fucking doing MMA, right? Or they're like, yeah, you can do it. You're just going to be shit at all three of them. But find individuals who do this stuff. See how they organize their training. See what the approaches they take. See the pitfalls they've made. And then go about doing what you're trying to do. Like, don't try to follow the program of someone who only does that one thing, or follow the advice of someone who only does that one thing. Like, again, like you're saying, like, you're looking at all these physique orientated people and you're like, I'm going to do his program, but I also want to do a marathon, so I'm going to do this other program on top of that. It's like, okay, well, like, that's not how you go about designing an overall training plan, an overall training structure. It's like the things have to complement each other, and they have to work in harmony. Because again, you'll see this all the time. Like I really like a high-low kind of approach to training. If you're doing a lot of different activities, like some days are going to be more intense, and then some days are going to be lower intensity. Like the way I basically have my training set up currently, again, my goals being I just want to be able to have a knock whenever, is I have 2 hard days of training, an easy day of training, 2 hard days of training, an easy day of training, and then a full day off, right? So those 2 hard days of training, they're back to back, but I have a lower body day and an upper body day. And on those 2 days, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And right now I'm only doing about an hour of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but when I go back home, I'll probably be doing 2 hours of Jits, right? Then my easy day, like, I just hit the heavy bag or practice some boxing, right? It's basically low intensity cardio. That's all for me. That's all it is, right? And that's purely just because I actually enjoy that. Like, I probably would get better results in terms of my actual goals, which is to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if I did another class of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But first of all, the class schedule doesn't really suit that for me, and also I'm too competitive for my own good, and I just really start pushing those classes, so it just becomes another hard day. But for me, then it's like, okay, that's a low intensity day. My heart rate, I'm not pushing the pace. I'm just basically hitting the heavy bag, and I'm not going that intense. My heart rate maybe goes up to 160, but for the vast majority of time, it's basically at that kind of 140-ish range, right? And that just keeps me entertained, allows me to get more conditioning in, allows me to burn through some calories, and generally I just like training more often. I like being able to move, right? Then again, the next 2 hard days, same thing again, a lower body day, an upper body day. Those 2, the evenings then, jits as well. And then on the Saturday, the 6th day, again, it's just me hitting the heavy bag. And it's just low intensity cardio. If I really wanted to, if I'm really feeling beat up from the jits, like, I can skip the heavy bag work. I can just have that as a full off day for that Wednesday. And again, I can have a full off day for that Saturday, right? So if you are planning out a training program, like, look at how your overall week is structured. Where are the really hard training days? Where are the really easy training days? Where are your rest days? Because this is really important when you try to have this kind of generalist approach, and you're looking at it from trying to combine 2 programs. Because people will be like, oh, like, I'll do this marathon runner's training program in the morning. I'll go for, he or she goes for fucking these yods in the morning. So I'm going to do that. And then in the evening, I'm going to do some resistance training, and I'm actually going to follow Phil Heath's program. It's like this. It's not designed. They're not designed to complement each other. Like, the volume of either of them is going to be inadequate. It's very, very real possibility that you'll have a really hard training session, or really hard training sessions back to back to back to back, day to day to day to day. And like, there could be a case where you're doing a really hard run in the morning and then trying to train legs in the evening, right? And that would be fine if you were then going to have an easier day the next day. But the next day could be just as hard for, maybe the cardio stuff in the morning is easy, but the resistance training in the evening is hard. So you've just had 2 hard days back to back. So it's like you have to look at the overall structure of the training program and what is it trying to achieve, and how does the overall structure work for your actual goals. And again, it just comes back to that needs analysis. Like, you say you have these different goals, but is the actual program helping you do that?
Yeah, and like, I suppose, like, to give people some encouragement, when you do implement things well, like, you can make progress with a number of different things. Like, I have one client at the moment, and she plays GAA, but she also took up triathlons, and she's also been resistance training for the last year, and she's like put on like a fairly significant amount of muscle, I would say like above average responder, lost quite a bit of fat, but also continued playing like county level football and took up triathlons. Like, she's someone that I would consider like, yeah, you're probably like, you respond really well to training, but at the same time, like, she plans out her weeks and like at the start every week, so obviously I got a program in place for her, but at the same time, she sends me like her timetable every week, like, this is what I'm doing, this is what time I'm getting up, this is when I'm going to bed, these are the times I'm in work, this is what time I have to be at training, so I'm going to fit in my conditioning work here, resistance training here, these are my meals that I've planned out. Like, that's not for everyone, but like, if you are trying to do multiple different things and you're trying to do them well, like, because she's at a high level of GAA and doing all the other things, like, you have to be fairly like on point with things. So like, that's when you're trying to bunch everything in together, and like, she's had great success with that. I have another client who was more so like doing the second approach I spoke about, where in the winter time, essentially what we did was he did a photo shoot. So during that period of time, like, we were focused on like more so resistance training, focusing really in on getting lean, getting shredded for that photo shoot, and then coming up to the summer, he actually booked a half marathon and then a marathon. So for most of this year so far, his primary training focus has been running, and we've been working towards that marathon that's upcoming soon. So there's different ways that you can approach it, but you definitely can make it work. Don't be discouraged. Like, that second guy I was talking about, like, he's like 90 kilos, like, has more muscle than I'll ever have, and he's doing a marathon. So like, you certainly can do these things. Once you do have to obviously have a bit of discipline, a decent work ethic if you do want to do multiple things, but it can certainly happen, and you can certainly get good results in a couple of different areas once you're not trying to do like 12 things.
Yeah, and that's another thing we should touch on, because we've touched on a lot about the training side of things, but your nutrition and your recovery have to actually support your goals, because
Yes,
everyone can be a fucking animal in the gym for an hour, 40 minutes, an hour. Like, you can just go to a fucking place in your head and push yourself beyond whatever you thought possible. Turn some good music on, whatever the fuck you enjoy, maybe some fucking bad music, maybe that motivates you, I don't know, and you can push yourself to the absolute limits. But it's irrelevant if your nutrition is shit and your recovery is shit. You're not sleeping, you're not doing anything to, we'll say, relax or turn the system down. Like, if you're not doing the things that are needed to support your training, then I'm not going to say that it's a waste of time, because it's not, but it's also a waste of your overall time. Like, you're not going to be getting the results that you hope for. So if it is something that it should have only taken 12 weeks to achieve, but because you don't sleep, your nutrition is all over the place, you're shit, it takes you 30 weeks to achieve it. Like, you might still achieve it, or you might not, but because your overall approach, your nutrition, recovery, everything is not supportive of your goals, then you're not going to get there as quickly as possible. And this again goes to the second approach, like I was saying, or the kind of periodized approach. Like, if you have multiple goals and you want to be good at a few different things, but this period of time in work or college or school or whatever is really busy, maybe all those other goals go on the back burner. You go, okay, right now for the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, I know work is really intense. It's like, this is our busiest period of the year. Maybe you work in retail or something, and there's, I don't know, fucking winter sales or something, or summer sales or whatever the fuck. And you're like, I know that it's really stressful. These days are long. I'm just tired at the end of it. You know, maybe you do back off on the training. You're going, this during this time, like I know I'm going to be stressed to the fucking tits. So I'm only actually going to do 3 resistance training sessions this week. And if I can fit in a jog or 2, happy days, right? And that's your approach. You're taking that step back, you know, and you're like, I'm actually just going to put a little bit more emphasis on getting enough sleep or doing things that relax me. Maybe it is having a fucking bath or something. I don't know. Whatever it is for you as an individual. And you do that because you know those 4 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever the fuck it is, are going to be busy. And then you go straight back into, you know, hammering towards your other goals because, you know, work is less intense now, you know? So you do have to look at the overall big picture, how your nutrition and how your lifestyle is actually supporting or detracting from your actual goals. Like what you say your goals are, not what you act your goals are, you know?
Yep, you are what you do, not what you say you do, someone said. But yeah, I think that rounds up pretty much everything we wanted to cover.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add, I don't think. Yeah, basically you just need to do some sort of needs analysis. Like we discussed previously, that kind of, you know, identify, isolate, integrate, and improvise approach. Don't know what episode it is, so you're going to have to go back and search. But that's a really good kind of thought process to have. But even if you don't want to go back and search for that, if you just have the thought process of, I'm going to do some sort of needs analysis, I'm going to actually assess what I think my goals are, what I say my goals are, and then I'm going to assess what I act my goals are. Like, what am I actually doing? And is that actually what I say that I'm trying to achieve? And if it's not, then are there justifications for that? Or are you just doing that for the sake of doing it? Do you mind, Gary? Are you just doing that because this is what X, Y, and Z person does, and you're just doing it because you actually need to assess that, identify that, and then kind of start isolating the different components that you want to work on, and then start integrating them into the bigger picture, the overall what you're trying to achieve. And then again, if you do sports and stuff, then that is that kind of improvise element where you're like, okay, I've trained these specific strength qualities, fitness qualities, whatever. How do I actually integrate that into an improvisational environment, like on the field, you know, or on the mats, you know? So you do have to take that kind of big picture approach and actually sit down and analyze your goals, you know?
Yep, sounds good to me. I've got my pen and paper ready.
So what are your goals, Gary? Just to get massive calves?
Huge calves, huge delts. I've taken your advice and I'm just going to train calves and delts, specifically middle delts, just literally just that part, because that's all that happens, obviously. Just train them 6 days a week. It's too easy.
If I was you, that's literally what I do, because man, those 2 body parts of yours, they just respond so well.
I actually have done cable lateral raises 3 days so far this week, so I'm on a roll.
And what about calves? How much volume have you been doing?
I've done a total of maybe 10 sets and 2 rounds of sprints. So that's decent calf stimulus. Like,
Oh, yeah, man, they're going to be fucking juicy as fuck.
you know, I'm on the path.
But yeah, I reckon we just wrap it up here because I'm sick and
Yep.
tired of looking at your face. So do you have anything to add to these fine people?
Main thing would be to get involved in our Triage Method community. That's the Facebook group. It's like, you know, it's getting more and more active, more and more members, and essentially that is the best place to have productive discussion, because like lots of people message me on Instagram, and like these days, like I download Instagram like once a day and I go on, and like when I have DMs, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like, oh, I don't really want to spend much time here. I'd rather like if it was in the Facebook group, because if you send a message in the Facebook group, then essentially that helps more people, you know, and then I can refer people back to it over time when we do give an answer. Because very often what happens is people message me or you or the Triage page, and you know, we answer that question, but then it's like, oh, now we have to answer that the same the next time someone asks. So we'd rather just have the content there to help as many people as possible. So yeah, get involved in the Facebook group. Like, I don't mind if people want to send in training clips or give us case studies of your clients or your friends or your nan. Like, I don't care, but I'm more than happy to put a lot of effort into discussion in the Facebook group.
Yeah, like it's way easier to actually, because it's like evergreen content. Like you can always go back and search it. Like Instagram is pretty shit for that. Like I actually think Instagram is a terrible medium overall, because there's no real like searchability. No, like if you answer a question, you put a post up and it relates back to a post you did fucking 20 weeks ago where you discussed something, you know, like maybe you wear fucking your Olympic lifting shoes doing RDLs, you know, and
Yeah.
every time you do it, someone goes, "Oh, is there a reason you're doing this?" And it's like you've answered that before, you know. So if you have to constantly keep answering it, it's just a time-consuming effort for you, right? Whereas the person seeking the information, if you don't answer them, it just looks like you're being disrespectful to them, right?
Yeah, that's the problem.
And so it's like, oh, like, how do you solve that? And the way you solve that is actually have somewhere that you can search to see if this question has been asked before. So the Facebook community does that. Obviously, our website does that as well. Like that's obviously the best place.
Yeah.
Like I hate that when people ask questions and it's like, yeah, no, I actually did a podcast on that, or I actually did an entire article on that. Have you read that? And they're like, no. Like it literally takes you 2 minutes to go to my website where we put out the most content, or go to the YouTube channel, or do whatever, and just do a quick search and see if we've actually put the content out before. Has your question been answered? I mean, we do have a Q&A form in this, in the bio here, or in the description. So it's like, you can use that, because again, like Instagram is terrible for DMs, because, you know, if you click into the DM, you pretty much have to answer it right there and then, because
Yeah.
there's no way to be like, mark as unread. Oh, I want to do that later. You know, there's no way to do that. So you're basically just relying on the fact that you're like, oh, I'll remember to click back into fucking Jonathan here who messaged me, and I'll remember that later when I actually have time to do this, you know? So the Facebook community is the easiest way to get actual feedback, because it's way more searchable and you can actually see what kind of content we put out. And even like, because of this, obviously this is going up on Instagram, or sorry, on YouTube, like even the YouTube comments, like they're not great for responding to in an effective manner, you know? And like obviously it's way better than fucking Instagram, but it's not as good as that Facebook community. So basically that's where you should be if you want to interact with us. We obviously have that Q&A form in the description. So if you do have questions, you can always shoot them our way on that, because we do actually have quite a few questions that we're going to get through either in informational posts or articles on the site, or in actual videos just answering that question itself, you know, or we'll do a Q&A video if there's a good few that we're like, yeah, we wouldn't mind getting through those. The other thing then is, if you are not on social media that much, you know, and you're kind of like, oh, I don't want to miss any of the content that they put out, or I want to keep on top of the content they're putting out, the best place to do that is the newsletter. Like obviously if you're in the Facebook group, you should be subscribed to the newsletter, but also in the Facebook group, like we do post that newsletter. Like we obviously do post that newsletter on our site every week and then put it on social media. But again, if you're not on social media a lot, you're not going to see that, you know. But if you are in the community and you're logging in specifically to go to the community, you can be like, I'm just going to type in newsletter. Oh, I can see all the newsletters they've done. Click into that. Same again, you can do that on our website. And so if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, that's where you get weekly deals. Like we do have a 10% discount code. It's 10%, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. 10% discount code. So when you sign up to the newsletter, like you get 10% discount for the store. So I do recommend that, obviously. Other than that, we obviously have our beginner ebook that's selling really well. People are enjoying it, got some good feedback. So if you haven't already, pick that up. Again, use the 10% discount code if you have signed up for the newsletter. And obviously we still have spaces left for online coaching, because this always happens every single year in the kind of July, August timeframe. Like kind of coaching goes down a little bit in terms of like we're not full capacity. And then in the September timeframe, everyone's like, oh, can I start tomorrow? You know, You know,
Mhm.
they're like you want to get in a little bit earlier than that, because it's usually in that August time frame people start dripping in. They're kind of like, oh, I'm back to my normal. I've had my fun at, I don't know, fucking whatever festivals or whatever holidays, because obviously everyone goes on holidays in August. And I want to get back in shape, or I want to really push towards my goals, whatever it is. You know, summer's over, new me, let's go. So if that is you, get in contact now. We can kind of reserve a space for you,
Mhm.
or get in contact in August. It's just a better time to get in contact with us rather than waiting till September and going, do you have space available? Because there's no guarantee that we will, you know. Um, Other than that, we do have some other books that were kind of in the works. So they'll become available soon enough. Ideally, I'd like to see them in 2 weeks, but you know, Gary's a little bit fucking lazy, so maybe not. Um, Other than that, is there anything else, Gary?
Nope. That's it, man.
Oh, actually, yeah. If you haven't already, subscribe, like our videos, do that whole shebang. Subscribe to the Instagram, YouTube, follow us on Facebook, whatever. You know yourself. Anything else, Gary?
It's too easy.
Literally is too easy.